I'm going to share with you 4 ideas for practice that nobody talked about when I was going to school. Back then, the idea was if you're not practicing hard enough and you're not putting in enough time, then that's the reason that you're not improving the way that you want to. I've come to realize that this is just totally not the case, and that sometimes it actually stops you from getting the improvement that you want. So I want to show you 4 ways that you can address your practice to make it much more efficient and get the results that you want. Okay, so the first idea I want to talk about is the principle of time management. This starts with making a plan. I always use the same template to plan my practice at the beginning of every week. I start with a quick warm-up. This is between 3 and 5 minutes just to warm up your body and your lips. It should not take longer than that. Then I move on to focusing on sound fundamentals, then technical fundamentals, and then the repertoire. It's the same thing every day, so I don't have to do any of that guesswork and I don't get stuck in a pattern of kind of randomly or aimlessly practicing different things. Okay, next, I really restrict the amount of time that I can spend on each individual thing in my practice. This is because focused work that's in short bursts produces much better results over time than spending a really long time on one thing. For example, if I practice, let's say, double tongue for an hour one day, I probably couldn't because my tongue would get so tired. But let's say I did, well, within about, honestly, 10 minutes, I'm too fatigued to really be learning new things. My tongue's tired, my mind's tired, especially if I'm working on that coordination. If instead I spend 5 minutes a day over, 15 days, I get much better bang for my buck, so to speak, because every single one of those 5-minute sessions was highly focused and I wasn't fatigued to the point where I couldn't do it properly anymore. So I end up with a much better result. This also stops me from sort of wasting time in the practice session itself by getting stuck and spending way too much time on one thing. If I spend 5 minutes on one fundamental, then I can just move on to the next one and do between 2 and 10 minutes on all of them. And then that's it. It's time to move on to repertoire. The next practice principle that I want to talk about is staying realistic. So I've learned to ask myself 2 really important questions when I'm facing a goal. 1, how much time do I have to achieve this goal? And 2, are there any fundamental skills that I have to actually acquire in order to achieve this goal? So for example, let's say you want to audition to a master's program at a highly competitive school where orchestral excerpts are a big part of that audition process. But you personally still really struggle to make diminuendos in tune. So let's say you had 3 months to achieve this goal. Is it realistic? Honestly, probably not. Because making diminuendos in tune, depending on where you're at with it, is a fundamental that takes more time to develop and solidify, because of course you're going to feel nervous and anxious and under pressure in that audition as well. Okay? On top of that, then you have to learn the excerpts and build those diminuendos into the excerpts themselves. So let's look at it as if there were 12 months. Maybe the goal is more realistic now, because you can spend several months acquiring the skill of diminuendos in tune, and then you can build that skill into the excerpts and have lots of time to get everything prepared for the audition. In this way, your practice becomes much more efficient and you don't get stuck in sort of that panic anxiety practice, I've done it lots before, where you spend hours and hours and hours over a short amount of time, like 6 weeks or something, to try and acquire a skill that just really can't be well acquired in that time. So even though you're putting in tons of time, you don't end up getting the result that you want. So those 2 questions really help me to organize and lay it out and come up with a plan that's really going to be efficient for the time that I have. So the next principle I want to talk about is one of addressing all of the aspects from the beginning. And basically, this just means that you're going to look at like the notes and the rhythms, but also the dynamics and articulations, and even have an idea of the style before you start to learn the piece. I can't tell you how many times I myself or my students have learned all the notes and rhythms and just save the dynamics for later or the articulations for later, and it never really goes well. Dynamics are something that require a lot of coordination in the body. It's really different to play a high forte note versus a high piano note. And so if we kind of learn everything with that middle of the road dynamic, we've actually learned everything with that middle of the road dynamic. And to do it properly with the dynamics that we want, then we have to go back and unlearn all of that middle of the road dynamic and relearn with the dynamics that we want. This takes twice as long, so it's not very efficient. Same with the articulations. If you don't learn them correctly the first time, then you have to go back and learn them correctly the second time. And I will also say the second time is harder because you've already learned it one time. So you have to override what you've already practiced coordinating. So this can save you tons of time just planning out and looking at least those first four things. So notes, rhythms, dynamics, and articulation, all from the beginning. So if you're finding these tips helpful, I just want to take a quick minute to tell you about our free community on School. So my partner, also named Sarah, and I have a Flute community on School where we focus on one fundamental every month. We give you progressive exercises over 4 weeks, and we also do a webinar where we really do a deep dive into that fundamental and answer as many questions that have come up as we can. So if that sounds interesting to you, the link is below in the video description. Lastly, I want to talk about flexibility. This is a really important principle in practice because sometimes when we don't have flexibility, we kind of get stuck on autopilot or repeat and end up doing things for too long and then don't get the results that we want. So, firstly, we have to know when it's time to progress an exercise. If you've been doing the same exercise for like a year, it's probably overdue time to progress. You want to be really listening to yourself or working with a teacher and understanding, okay, I'm not really getting an improvement or result out of this exercise anymore, so it's time to progress either to a harder exercise or shift your focus to a different fundamental that might now be weaker than the one that you were focused on. Another element of flexibility is to know how to sort of manage your time in those emergency seasons. So with students, I often find that as they approach their recital, especially undergraduate students, the flexibility thing kind of goes out the window and they kind of panic practice everything. So flexibility is just understanding, okay, what's coming up next that is the hardest, that is going to take the most amount of time, and how can I shift my practice to accommodate that without just throwing my warm-up and all my fundamentals out the window because I've decided I don't have time for it anymore. Knowing exactly how to be flexible with your time and managing your expectations with what you're able to do really saves a lot of time in the practice room and continues to progress that long-term overall skill building that sometimes we forego when we feel like we're under a lot of pressure. I hope that these tips are helpful for you. Sometimes the real magic happens when someone can give you personalized feedback on exactly what you're doing at exactly the right moment in time, and that's what really helps you push through whatever's holding you back and actually move forward with your progress. I wanted to let you know that Sarah and I also have a paid program, and the link is in the video description. So if you would be interested in working with us one-on-one, I would encourage you to check it out.